Right, so thanks everyone for joining us this evening. It's really nice to see so many people along for the talk. The pod project is based, as we said, in County Down, but we've been doing a series of lockdown talks with different people from across Ireland. So I'm really glad that Debbie has agreed to do this talk on seeds today. So thanks, Debbie, very much.
Well, thank you, Marianne, for having me and Pod Project. It's really lovely to be asked, and this is my first ever opportunity to give a webinar, so I hope you'll all bear with me, and I hope it's enjoyable. So first of all, I wanted to talk, or just point out Nikolai Vavalov. He is really our grandfather of seed collecting and seed banking. He, after living through the famine in 1921-22, he dedicated his life to alleviating famine, and he basically started up the research institute in St. Petersburg, and he dedicated his life to it. And while Lenin was in charge, you know, Vavalov did well because Lenin supported his ideas, but unfortunately another man came along, Lychenko, and Lychenko had this idea that he could vernalize seeds through temperature control, and he was wrong. But he had Stalin's ear when Stalin came into power, and Lychenko systematically went through the Russian system of food production and you know, research, and had people jailed. He grew in popularity, and he had people jailed and sentenced to death for not believing in his vernalization methods, which then went on to cause two famines, one in Russia and one in China later on in the 50s. By 1948, Lychenkism, as he termed it, it wasn't made illegal, but you know, nobody was to follow it, and I can't think of the word. But in the meantime, our hero Vavalov had died in prison of starvation, ironically. So he created at the time, and for about 100 years, his seed bank was the largest seed bank in the world until the Doomsday Seed Vault, which I'll show you in the next slide. It remained the largest seed bank in the world for crops and crop wild relatives. And Nikolai Vavalov used to travel around. He traveled around the Fertile Crescent with a train of horses and donkeys and lots of assistants, and they visited farmers, landowners, anybody, and they took a sample. They asked them for a sample of their particular grain, and they took some history of it. He took notes on everything he collected, and brought it all back to Russia for this, what became the largest seed bank. And it's because of his work. We still stand upon his work. And fairly recently, I don't know if you heard, there was a problem with wheat in the last couple of years, and it was seed taken from the Vavalov Institute that started the process of solving that problem. Well, I've written it down there, but during the siege of St. Petersburg in the Second World War, the Nazis had invaded St. Petersburg and were searching for the seed bank. But his assistants would stand guard, and actually 9 of those 17 assistants actually starved to death while sitting up on bags of rice and potatoes and grains, rather than give it up and let it be discovered by the Nazis. So because of them, we have a lot to thank them for. So if you want to read about all that, it's that book, Murder of Nikolai Vavalov. It's just a good read if you like biographies. I think we're going to share this, aren't we? Because I've got lots of links. We're going to share this presentation with everybody, anybody who wants it. So we've got lots of links, so you can get them afterwards if you like. So this is the Doomsday Seed Vault, or Svalbard Global Seed Vault. It's up in the Arctic Circle, built into the side of a mountain in permafrost. So you can see in the picture on the left, it's all frosty, but the picture on the right, it's defrosted somewhat. So you maybe have heard on the news that it's defrosted enough for some water to flow down just the entranceway and make it a bit slippy for people to get in. So I'm not sure what they've done to solve that problem, but it's just indicative of global warming, because when they built it, they thought it'll never defrost, and that's why they put it there. But unfortunately, it is starting to. So, but still, it's still very well placed in a cold place. So they don't do research, but they do store grain. They have seeds from pretty much every country in the world now, and it is now the largest seed bank in the world. So yeah, I've written down there. Syria's seed bank, which was bombed in the war, was repopulated by Svalbard from samples that they had given originally. So it is a working seed bank, and it does, you know, it's a two-way street. It'll produce seeds as well as take them in and look after them. And I've written down there, Ireland sent a consignment in 2009. So there's a lot of people involved in that, and you can read about that link at the bottom. So it's good to know we've got samples in the seed bank. So then a bit closer to home, this is Kew's Millennium Seed Bank. You probably know about it at Wakehurst. Marianne, you do, yeah. So, and the Millennium Seed Bank, as its name would suggest, was born in the year 2000, and they are looking after plants rather. I mean, they do house crop wild relatives, but they're really concentrate on indigenous flora from around the world, and it's incredible. So I stayed there for 3 weeks. If you look at the greenhouse on the right of the picture, and there's lodgings underneath that. I stayed there for 3 weeks in 2016, learning all about seed conservation, and it's just the most amazing facility. And everybody who works in Kew can do everybody else's job. So, you know, and they're all so knowledgeable and so helpful, and it's incredible what they do there. And they can house, so recalcitrant seeds are seeds that won't freeze, but they won't withstand drying down to therefore be frozen. Sorry. So normally to store seeds, they would, and this is what True Harvest Seeds does as well. In order to store seeds, we dry them down to 15% relative humidity, which is critically dry for a seed. Although 8% is usually the threshold that would kill seeds, 15% is still dry enough so that it can be frozen at -20. And when seeds are kept at 15% relative humidity, you know, kept dry and frozen at -20, they can last for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, we haven't been storing seed in that way for long enough to see, you know, how long that actually lasts for. But you can extrapolate from, you know, if you lift the seeds out and see what percentage die-off you've had, you can sort of extrapolate that, you know, after 10, 20, 50, 100 years, you're going to have, you know, such and such percentage loss in viability. And some seeds haven't lost any viability in the 20 years that you have had them in storage. So the chances are they'll last for hundreds and thousands of years. I've got another wee thing later on about storing seeds in the cold. So I thought I'd talk a bit more about global seed companies and global food supply. The agri-giants. So agri-giants, as we know them today, excuse me, started off life pretty much as chemical companies, and after the Second World War, they didn't have a lot to do with themselves. So they started making fertilizer for agriculture, and around that time, after the war in the late 40s, seed companies chemical companies started to realize that seeds was the way forward, and they started buying up seed companies, and they still do that to this day. So there's seed companies, the smaller seed companies tend to get bought over and swallowed up by large ones. And so I mean, Bayer is a huge agrochemical seed company. They purchased Monsanto, who you will all have heard of. But Bayer also sold off its seed business to BASF, who are now one of the biggest seed companies. DuPont merged with Dow Chemical, and then they've spun off Corteva Agriscience, which is their seed division of that. But then Corteva acquired the canola from BASF. So, you can kind of see that they all know each other, and they all, have the seed. They have, they have the global seed supply kind of wrapped up. Those big companies supply around 97% of the world's food seeds today. So if something was to happen, we would all find ourselves in difficulties. And the seeds that they concentrate on are mainly grains and cereals and grasses. Not so much grasses, grains and cereals. Corn, canola, that kind of thing. Vegetable seeds do make up a small part of their business, but the vegetable seed sales haven't really risen in the last 5 years. But the revenue generated from vegetable seed sales has increased quite a lot in the last 5 years. So vegetable seeds are starting to rise in importance. You can find out, so that link, that top link there, agro pages, you kind of have to register, and then they say they withhold the right to use your name. So but that's a very interesting website, agro pages, and it's all to do with the promotion of these big ag companies and their chemical uses. So, and then if you're interested in the real facts and figures, I could have put them all in, and I thought I'd just give you the link, and if you're interested, you can look at them. So countries, I thought it was interesting. Countries that import the most vegetable seed in descending order: the Netherlands, and you see the way companies that export the most vegetable seed is the Netherlands. What the Netherlands does is they grow a small amount of seed for bulking up for seed, then they export it to different countries who then obviously import it, and those countries bulk up the seed and then export it back to the Netherlands. So the Netherlands are a huge seed producer, but they don't grow all the seeds themselves. So you never really know where seeds come from. This is grain crop seeds. You never really know where seeds come from, even if they say on the packet. So that's important sort of going forward when we're thinking about wildflower seeds. So at home, so in Ireland, I'm sure everybody knows Irish Seed Savers and their work. They started working on apple tree species. So they, as well as raising awareness into the importance of seed sovereignty, food security, and they have some amazing training courses on as well, so you can see what they do there. We also have as a seed supplier, this is for vegetable seeds, obviously, brown envelope seeds. So that's Madeline, that's brown envelope seeds, also quite long-standing company and fabulous seeds from Madeline. And the Organic Centre North Leitrim, I think they used to grow seeds, but I'm not sure if they still do. But it's a lovely website and lovely training courses. There's a lovely centre, visitor centre, as well worth a visit. Abby?
Sorry, Debbie. Sorry to interrupt. Somebody's just asked if you was it organic or commercial seeds that these companies specialise in, or both?
So the big ag companies.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of their revenue is GM. I don't really think they're interested in organic. I haven't seen any evidence of that. But really, they're GM companies. They do some standard seed. Standard, that's not the right word for it, but they do some non-GM seed, but mostly it's GM.
Okay.
So no, I don't think organic comes into their remit at all. There's some lovely, I mean, Irish Seed Savers and Brown Envelope were organic, registered organic. There's a few companies, smaller companies in England. So there would be Railseed Company, Tamar Organics in Wales and England respectively. And they're good. They're good for seeds, and they'll do, you know, open pollinated varieties. But those big ag, no, they're not interested in organic. Not as far as I know anyway.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. So Gaia, tell me if I'm going too fast, or, you know, and it's probably a lot to take in. I've been studying this for a long time, so it's easy for me to rattle through it.
No, well, so do you want me to ask these questions as they come? I'll put them into the end.
Yeah, no, actually, I quite like that. That was quite good to get a question, as I'm not used to this webinar thing at all.
No, well, and it's quite a different sort of setup, isn't it? Well, somebody has asked what bulking up seed means, which I think would be quite useful to know.
That is a good question. So it works for if you're vegetable seed breeding. It also works for if you're, you know, say doing wildflower seed collections from the wild. So you start off with quite a small amount of seed. Say maybe you had 1,000 seeds from, you would want, well, ideally you would want to have from as many adults as possible. So perhaps you had, say 10,000 seeds from 200 adults, which actually just happens to be our optimum wildflower seed collection guidelines that we work to. And that means you've got a broad genetic base, 200 parents, 10,000 seeds. So if you were to sow all those 10,000 seeds, then you would maybe produce 1 million seeds. Depends on the plant very much, but say you produced 1 million seeds from that, that's you bulking up from 10,000 to 1 million seeds. And this is also to do with pre-basic, basic and standard seeds. So if you were vegetable seed breeding, you would produce pre-basic seeds, and those would be your very small amount that you maybe got from a distinct uniform strain that you had stabilized over 7 years. You would then, you maybe have 10,000 seeds, say, of those. You may not have that many, but you would start to bulk them up. So 1 year you would grow them all, and you would get that crop, and you'd have maybe, you know, 50,000 seeds. So I'm bulking up every year then as you go along, until you eventually create enough basic seeds. So you go from pre-basic to basic, which is a second generation. You would have more of them. You may give them out to farmers who would then bulk them up again. They would produce standard seeds, and it's the standard seeds that are sold then across, you know, websites to you and I for our vegetable seed growing. And you wouldn't really breed from standard seeds. You would want to breed from basic or pre-basic seeds. It's a very long answer.
No, that's good, because it, you know, I hadn't realised that's what the process was.
Yeah.
Is that what you discuss in part 2?
Well, I could do, but no, probably not really. No, part 2, I was going to stick to how to get the best results from your seeds and how to actually grow them, and pitfalls of growing seed for seed, and, you know, things you can do. And I was going to talk a bit about vegetable seed breeding and how to get, you know, how to try and avoid genetic bottlenecks.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it was more practical seed.
Yeah, no, that's why I was just, you know, I was just conscious of the question I was going to ask, you know, was related to that. But you carry on, and I'll
yeah, no, it's good to get that sorted out.
No.
So Gaia recently, well, not very recently now, I suppose 3 years ago, started up a program for UK and Ireland, talking about seed diversity and really, well, seed sovereignty. So it's Seed Sovereignty UK program. And they have recently set up an advisory committee for the island of Ireland to deal with local seed issues. So I'm on the seed advisory board So we had our first meeting there last week. And we shall be continuing in September. So I'm also on the board of an initiative, the European Native Seed Producers Association. I haven't written down here, but ENSPA, so we call ourselves ENSPA, European Native Seed Producers Association. And we're creating guidelines for European legislation as producers, so that when Europe finally begins to legislate the production of wildflower seeds, which currently isn't the case, that we can advise them on best practices and best, legislation that won't actually hurt the existing industry. So it's quite, I think it's and the seed industry, especially wildflower seed industry in Ireland, is thoroughly unregulated. There's so we wanted, and also some countries in Europe, it's very heavily regulated, over-regulated really, and in some it's not regulated at all. It includes Ireland as a whole. So we wanted to we got together. Also, this would also stem from a Gaia initiative, and we wanted to just make sure that practices, the legislation the government brings in won't stop producers from being able to work effectively and realistically going forward. So we expect Europe to start legislating. Although who knows what will happen with Brexit and here, but I mean, of course, we still got the South, so we hope that Ireland is going to be seen as a unit, a geographical unit, rather than being divided politically, because wildflower seeds and bees don't see borders. So those are all borders, or all hurdles, but still to jump over. So
that sounds very complicated.
Really, it's so difficult to try and explain, to summarize. I hope it's making enough sense.
It is, yeah. I mean, when you said here about issues of where did you say that? Deal with local seed issues. What sort of issues would it be? Would it be about growing rights or things like that?
Well, there's things like, so, your customer, so quality control is a big issue. There's no quality control for native seed producers, no quality control regulations for native wildflower seed producers here. And I mean, quality control doesn't need to be a whole big rigmarole. It can just be that a company engages in some kind of sensible germination testing and can, batch numbers and can refer back to batches with the germination test results. And I mean, that's fairly easy to do. If you were to sort of apply the very convoluted and very well advanced vegetable seed testing regulations straight on top of wildflower seed producers who exist as they exist now, they would really struggle to catch up with that sort of legislative burden, and you would hurt an industry that's already, well, in Ireland, our seed production or wildflower seed production in Ireland is probably less advanced than other European countries, and there would be less of us as well, fewer people doing it, so it would have a smaller voice. So it's one of the reasons that this advisory committee for Ireland is actually such a good thing. We can all get together and talk about issues that we have. So that would be one. Certification would be another. Getting a standard of certification would be a nice idea, because then people who subscribe to that, the customers will know automatically that they have a set of guidelines that they are following in terms of production and quality. So And then there's export, and there's import, and there's where do you source your seeds from? How do you bulk them up? What methods of production do you use? Are you organic, or are you, do you?
List is endless then, I see.
Yes, it's a big list. I'm just checking the time.
I'm on a webinar thing. Dad'll ring you back.
I think that's Alex. Says Alex. Alex, we can hear you.
Oh God, right, sorry.
So here's a thing I really wanted to get across. So why, you know, so Ireland, why go native? Why think about native seeds? And this is to do with restoration projects and wildflowers. This country, you know, Ireland has been an island for 14,000 years ish, give or take, and we have more than likely our flora has adapted. If it needed to adapt, it will have had time to adapt. For example, Madagascar has been separated from Australia for 12,000 years, and some of the mammals and marsupials there are up to 30% larger in size because they're much colder than ones in Australia. So having originated from Australia, that is a genetic adaptation in mammals that's quite pronounced, and that's after just 12,000 years. So our plants have had opportunity, excuse me, have had opportunity to adapt. So, but there has been no genetic testing done. Well, there's been a few. Bluebells have had some genetic testing done, and a woman who has done her doctorate on that, I had a conversation with once upon a time about it. Very interesting. So the trouble with, and this highlights the trouble with bringing in same species but foreign origin seeds and plant material. So the classic example is the two pictures on our right. Is you can see the middle picture of the bluebells. That is very obviously a Spanish bluebell, and you can see flowers coming out. Can you see my mouse moving? Flowers coming out both sides, and very upright and very much like a hyacinth. Broad leaves is another feature. And then the picture on the right, you can see there's a sort of droop in the stems, and most of the flowers are on the sort of underside, if you like, but there are still some on the top side. Leaves are still broad, and they're potentially a hybrid. But everybody knows, I hope, because I couldn't find a picture, what our native bluebell looks like. It's much taller. The flowers are all on one side of the stem only. They're really quite dark blue, and the trumpets would be much narrower, and the leaves are also narrower. So primroses cross and they back cross. Hybrids hybridize with parents, with other hybrids, and there's a whole mishmash, and sometimes you can't even see the genetics of the Spanish bluebell or vice versa in plants, and you might think you're looking at a pure of either one, but you may not be. Can't tell without genetically testing it. And this is happening, so we've got huge amounts of seed, native seed being imported into the country on restoration projects, for even gardens, for you name it. And those, so there's a lot of seed production in Hungary, so a lot of our wildflowers would be coming over, you know. Oh yes, this is red campion, for example. It's a native species. Plonk it into Ireland, it will certainly hybridize with Irish red campion, for example, and the result will be a hybrid. And with the the testing just hasn't been done, and this is what we're calling on the, in fact, we'll be soon calling on the Environment Minister to have a look at and see if he can do something to stop the import until at least we can do the research and find out if we have Irish plants or if they are just a subset of European or British. We just don't know, and it's just not knowing that means we should take a precautionary principle and just maybe halt it for a while and save what we can of the Irish. If it's not Irish, well, then no harm done. If there is, then we've saved. In a global perspective, we're an island in the whole world, so we kind of owe it to our plants and nature really to do the right thing. So that's lecture over.
That was lovely. Really good.
And just to illustrate the point again, the picture on the left, you see the primroses there growing in a hedgerow close to where I live, and you see the very pink ones.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be a shop bought one, and whether that's a hybrid beside those native ones beside it, or whether somebody maybe planted them like that, who knows? But they'll more than likely hybridize and then left with some pink version. Oh, sorry.
Do the pollinators have issues with the hybridized ones or the imports?
Well, not that we really know. We'd have to more testing would have to be done, and they would have to be watched to see how pollinators did react. I mean, there's lesser bird's foot trefoil has been brought into this country as a fodder crop for a long time, and coming from abroad, its flowering time is, and I was told this one time by somebody from butterfly conservation, so I don't know if it's 3 weeks before or 3 weeks after, but that flowering time was up to 3 weeks different than the flowering time of bird's foot trefoil, which will impact on our pollinators at different flowering times. So our pollinators are coming out looking for flowers that they're used to and not being able to access nectar, pollen, and possibly potentially starve. So
yeah, because some I thought are very fussy, aren't they? They like bees particularly. Some of them only like don't have enough tongues, or for the
Yeah, and it just messes up the whole system. I mean, maybe global warming is going to do that anyway. Who can tell? I mean, there's a hawthorn tree that's been planted around our local area, and hawthorn's native. But this particular batch of trees that have been planted start coming into leaf in January. I'm not joking, in January, and they're flowering a few weeks later, so their flowering is way early. So by the time our bees emerge, those particular trees have no flowers left.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah,
it's that sort of it's those subtle differences that we wouldn't really necessarily notice, but our insects will. And of course those berries then are ready particularly early, and they don't stand during the winter for the birds. So it's just a knock-on effect, and those will hybridize with our own hawthorn and probably have an intermediate effect. Look, haven't researched it at all, but that's just my guess on what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Hybrids are more often than not intermediates of the two parents.
Mm-hmm.
We better press on. This is the one I was going to talk about earlier, about the seed banking. I couldn't tell you what year it was. In the last few years, you maybe heard about it in the news. In Siberian permafrost, some seeds were found that a squirrel had squirreled away, and the scientists who wrote that article that you can read germinated the seeds, and they did germinate and grew some plants. And I think, to all intents and purposes, the plants looked the same until they flowered, and then the flowers were different, and genetically they were a bit different as well. So those seeds stayed under that frost for 32,000 years.
Oh my goodness.
That was being frozen really works. So So yeah, I was just going to talk about pre-harvest seeds. I can see the time, we're 10 to 9. But,
Don't rush, you're all right.
yeah. So we focus on Irish wildflowers of native origin, indigenous wildflowers. So it takes us out into the wilds, talking to landowners who haven't improved their land, with seed from abroad. And we really, some landowners are just fabulous. They really can talk, and they really know the history of their land and their species. So we've been very lucky with donations to the bank, the seed bank, and we've got 368 seed collections of native origin wildflowers. Some trees, there's trees as well, if you have more, again, trees, shrubs, crop wild relatives. And then we've got 229 herbarium specimens, DNA samples. And for each of those, most of them, 99% we've got photographs, and we've got data for all of them, because without the data, a seed collection isn't worth anything. You don't know anything about it. So that's just some pictures. That's the bottom left is some of us out seed collecting, young and old. And the middle one is that's our foil packets that go into the seed bank. Those foil packets are guaranteed for 25 years at -20. But they'll not really stay there for 25 years, because after 10 years, it's good protocol to take the seeds out, grow some out in the environment that we have today, and then bank the seeds of them. And what that means is our seeds are, the seeds that go back into the seed bank are sort of climatized, if you like, to current climate. They're because a lot can happen. Well, especially at the minute, a lot can happen in 10 years. But that's protocol that Q's Millennium Seed Bank use. So we use a lot of their protocols. They contributed a lot to our methods and ways of thinking. And then on the right is a photograph of a herbarium specimen, and that's basically a pressed flower. So that, say, 200 years from now, when some school children have got their hands on our seed bank and are rifling through the packets, and they've got a number, and they just want to check. So each part of the collection carries the same serial number, and they just want to check that the seed they've got is what actually grew, and they've got the right thing. They can look up the herbarium specimen. And the DNA samples, well, that's handy. Well, we're keeping the DNA so that we haven't done the testing. Firstly, it's expensive, so we haven't had the time either. But you have to use the same method if you're going to get DNA from a similar species from somebody else. You have to use the same method of testing that they did to be able to compare your results effectively. So we haven't done the testing yet for that reason as well, but we've kept the samples. And then here's some of our conservation work. So we collected, these are 3 Schedule 8 species. On the left is Crombie maritima. It's not very easy to see with this. Can you see my mouse when I wave it over the screen?
Yes, yeah, we can. Yeah.
So that's Crombie maritima with a really fabulous population collection of seeds on it. So those seeds, so we collected some from the wild, a very small amount from the wild, to grow out in our raised beds so that we don't have to collect again from the wild. And those seeds will go into the seed bank. And it'd be a lot more in the seed bank than if we just tried to bank the few that we got, because literally it was, I can't remember, but it was in the teens. It was a very small number of seeds. The same for this next one is Oyster Plant. So this low growing one in the background, there's quite a few of them. And they're doing really well, seeding like crazy in there. So we're collecting their seeds to do the same, to bank those seeds and more of them. And then this last one is a little plant called Hypocaris glabra, smooth cat's ear, very rare. And I was just talking to our partners on this today, and we're checking this hybridizes with another Hypocaris radicata, cat's ear. And of course, last year we couldn't tell whether the seeds we were getting were hybridized, because radicata and glabra hybridize very readily. And there was radicata in the area. So our seeds, but we can't tell because we don't know where the pollinators have been. So our seeds may well have been hybrids. And we are starting to wonder, are they hybrids? And we may not have the one we thought we had at all, but a hybrid. And indeed, there may not be any of that Hypocaris glabra left. They may all be hybrids up there, up in McGilligan, but we'll see. We just have to wait and see. We're going to go back up and look for some more this year. We collected that last year. So it's a long, slow process trying to find out all these things for each individual species, especially the endangered ones, where what we've got, how we can rescue it. When we grow it out, we have to wait a year to see if we've got the right thing at all. Yeah, it takes a long time.
Sounds very patient. Can I just ask what a species 8 means?
Oh, yes, a Schedule 8. So
Schedule 8, sorry.
That is the schedule, the list of plants that the government have listed that are particularly vulnerable plants. So I think there's 64 or 62 on the list at the moment, but they're actually currently updating. They're in the process of updating the list, so we think there's going to be an awful lot more on the list. There's a lot of our species are, well, they're on the priority. There's a priority species list as well, and so a lot of those will probably move on to the Schedule 8. And there's also a lot of species in steep decline out in the wild, so they'll probably go onto the priority species list. But the idea is to get as many of them into the seed bank as we can as soon as possible, partly, because climate change is happening. We can see that now, and that affects a lot of the Schedule 8 species, because a lot of them would be alpine species who, of course, are getting warmed up too much. They can't climb up mountains and get cooler quick enough to combat climate change, the changes in their habitat. So long answer yet again.
No, that was great, because I wasn't sure.
Yeah, Schedule 8. So Schedule 8 is the protected plants. Schedule 9, for example, is the noxious plants that the government requires us to take out if we have them in our property. So things like ragweed and thistles. So this is the last thing that I was going to talk about. I think this is the last one. So sustainability. So this is just True Harvest Seed sustainability, and we decided in 2017, just in case we didn't get more grant funding, that we ought to do something. So we started in our field. So this bottom left is some of our row crops, looking very neat and tidy. I can tell you this spring it's a lot scruffier now with weeds. So these are some of our row crops, and we're growing out seeds. These were we went back to our landowners and took they allowed us to take seeds to put into commercial production, and so we did that, bulk them up in the first instance, so there's enough to put out in the field. And then now this year there's been enough to put out in the field and get a crop off. Small crops last year, so every year we're trying to add more species to the shop, to the list, but it's so much. There's an awful lot of work doing True Harvest Seeds. I could employ 5 people tomorrow, but just getting the startup funds to fund their wages.
Yes.
But I mean, it's possible that with all the new Edwin Poots he's put out a new initiative, and there's all this there's the green initiatives that they want people to maybe take employment in conservation. So you never know.
Crossed.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's some seed cleaning in the middle. That's some of our saves, and the resulting packets on the right that we send out to customers. So our packets are kind of gardener size packets. So they maybe have, it depends on the size of the seed as well, you know, maybe 60 seeds or 200 seeds or 300 seeds. So that, you know, sometimes you order tomatoes and you get like 200 tomato plants and you don't know what to do with them all. It's sort of along those lines. People don't have to get hundreds and hundreds of plants. So yeah.
And Debbie, could you, like, I've got a couple of questions here coming up, and I will ask them in a second. But I just wondered if were you planning to say how you got started on all of this?
Oh yes, I could do. Well,
would you mind sharing?
Oh no, not at all. On a potted version. Well, both my grandfathers. One grandfather grew vegetables, and my other grandfather he grew flowers for my granny. And between them, they taught me how to grow seeds, sow seeds, grow, you know, prick out the little babies into pots and look after them, and then put them out when they're big enough to withstand the slugs and, you know, the bad weather, or put them out in the good weather. And so they taught me how to grow, and really just had a lifetime of growing. In 2005, I worked as a volunteer sort of leader with TCV in the Wildflower Nursery in Knockbracken, and I loved that. So I was there. I only had to leave because eventually I moved house 30 miles and the commute was just getting too much. So I had to leave that. I was there for nearly a year, and I just loved that. So I think that started off my love affair with wildflowers. And then I moved into vegetable seed production, so organic. Wasn't registered organic, but not using any chemicals. So 2010, me and two friends, we ran a veg box scheme for 3 years. But well, it was difficult because we lost our field. We'd had the loan of a field for 3 years, and then we lost that. So it was difficult to keep that going. We did import organic veg for a while, but then that just took away any profit margins. So there was no, you know, we weren't getting anything. We were just working a lot for expenses. And then, so we had a look around and we got talking to people, and we really realized that wildflowers, you know, there was no, we realized there's no seed bank for wildflowers in Ireland. And I should have mentioned Glasnevin, actually. In February 19, they announced that they were going to create a seed bank. Since they were a national National Botanic Gardens, that they should have a seed bank. So they're concentrating in the south, which is great. It means I don't have to do the south, because really we're in all Ireland. True Harvest Seeds is an all Ireland seed saving project, but it's tough enough getting the ones in the north in, because usually our funding only applies to the north. We do have some collections from the south, but if they concentrate in the south, I'm very happy, and we'll collect seeds from the north. So yeah, we kind of we were sitting around, and I said, where's Ireland's seed bank? Because we were looking at seed banks, and where's Ireland's seed bank? And our seed saver is brilliant, but they're vegetables, so we're okay, right, well, where else? And looked and searched, and realized there wasn't one. So I said, I'm going to start one. And here we are 7 years later. So yeah, it's been it's a labor of love, for sure.
It sounds it from our conversations. It sounds a lot of work.
Yes, it is a lot of work, and I might add, I'd like to thank my wonderful volunteers. Alex, who is on screen, Alex has been volunteering and encouraging other volunteers to come too. So it's brilliant. Another very long-term volunteer who isn't in this webinar. She's been with me since the beginning of 17. And I really think it's, you know, sometimes you just need you just need other people to talk to about things, and is this a silly idea, or is this going to work, or so she's kept me sane for a long time. Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's marvelous that you're doing this, and as you've explained, it's so important work, and we just don't know the impact yet of of what climate change is going to do and what hybridization is going to do. So, it's people like yourselves are doing all this. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. It would be a shame not to do it, and then it sometimes it feels like one of those things that people are going to, in maybe 100 years' time, like Vavalov, people are going to say, "Oh, that was lucky. Somebody did that."
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it feels like that sometimes.
Yeah, maybe I'll appreciate it in 100 years' time. I think actually it'll be a bit closer to home, though, isn't it? Because I think we all experienced during this lockdown that we wanted to get hold of seeds, and then it was difficult to do so. So actually, it's perhaps easier for people to appreciate now why knowing where your seeds are coming from and that you have a secure supply is important.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so much easier looking at them than looking for them.
So yes, your Schedule 8 sounds like it's going to be endless.
Yes, yeah. I don't know how many the government are going to add to the list. I hope it's a lot, really. I hope it's a comprehensive list, because some species are very hard to find, frighteningly scarce, and species, so populations are getting more and more fragmented, which means genetically they're getting less, diverse.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with that, then there's their strength can be compromised.
I think it's happening, isn't it, across the board with plants and insects, isn't it? And animals, they're just being lots of islands of,
Mm-hmm.
So they, as you say, fragmented. They can't, I think it's very sad and very dangerous,
Yes. So, but there's a lot of people are interested. There's a very nice project in England that I'm now not going to be able to remember the name of. Sorry.
Don't think too hard. It'll come.
No, I'm thinking too hard. But he's working on Schedule 8 plants. Oh, I wish I could remember what it's called. Well, sorry, I shouldn't have said anything.
No, don't be worrying. It'll come to you later. And
it will.
It will.
2 o'clock this morning.
Probably. Well, it's nice to know that there's people out there working on it, and that they're more. It's lovely that so many people have come along today, because there's clearly an interest.
Yeah, it is. I mean, seeds, we see these sort of life cycle pictures, and kids see that in school, and you plant the seed, you grow the flower, or you grow the vegetables and you eat the vegetables, and then you go back to the supermarket the next year and plant the seed, buy the seed to plant the seed. It's missing. There's a bit missing for kids. Kids need to get that they can grow, that's where the seeds come from, is the plants themselves, not the supermarket packet. So, but
I don't think that's just kids. I think that's everybody can realize that they can, honestly, everybody can do this, and that if you've got this stuff during lockdown, everybody being quite inventive and then going, oh, actually, let's try growing a lemon or a melon or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think all this about F1 varieties has meant that people don't try to grow seed.
Well, see, that was something I experimented with in 2008. I heard that you could get seed back from F1 varieties. So I started with tomatoes and purple sprouting broccoli, F1s, bought F1 varieties, grew them out first year, super, saved the seeds, grew them out second year, and got some plants. So some grew, but they never grew to be anything very much. The tomato plants didn't do at all. The broccolis grew, but they grew to about, maybe 6 inches tall and flowered, and then couldn't set seed. They just were too bad. So maybe you can get them out still. I don't know about that, but I couldn't, not with tomatoes and purple and broccoli. I didn't get a chance to try any more than that because it was quite, it takes a couple of years to do that. But I've been breeding parsnip seeds. I didn't get to plant them again this year, but my parsnip seeds, I put them in, dry them down the way, 15% relative humidity, -20 in 2017. And I got them out this year and did germination tests on them, and they all come up. And in normal circumstances, parsnip seeds don't survive from one year to the next, but these survived really well, and at 15% at -20. So I was really encouraged by, that's our seed saving, our seed banking methods, because parsnips are one of the hardest to keep year on year.
Yeah, and I guess that's some of the things that we're going to touch on in part 2. But I think it's just very interesting. And the bit that I hadn't appreciated, and that that you have to actually, if you're be next week's talk a little bit about how far apart you have to keep seeds to stop them hybridizing or things like that.
Yes. There's been books written on the subject. So. Yeah, you do. You have to, and there's all sorts of, because it really goes it not just by genus, but also by family. So let's think of one, Apiaceae. You kind of have to keep. Tell you what, I'll talk about it next week. How does that sound?
No problem. I think I sprung that on you. Would you like me to ask some of these questions, or perhaps get people to ask the questions themselves?
Yes.
Either or. I mean, if you stop screen share your screen, I can't talk now. Share screen. That's it.
There, like that.
Then you can see people.
If I do
gallery view, then you get to see everybody. And then if anybody wants to just, they can either raise their hand and ask the question, or if they want me to ask it, put it into the chat. So it just makes it more interesting if it's just not me yakking away at you. But I was just looking back at some of these questions.
Okay.
Can Irish wildflower seeds be suitable for Scotland or only Ireland? Are many wildflowers the same?
Okay, I wouldn't have said so. I mean, they probably are. So there's a report out called the Walker Report in 2009, and Walker et al. Did a lot of research about plants and how genetically different they are, depending on their, they did 2 categories, wind pollinated and insect pollinated. And the Walker Report illustrated that wind pollinated plants are genetically quite far spread, far flung, but insect pollinated plants tend to be in clusters, closer, more local clusters. And bees, as we know, that have a kind of a radius of 3 miles from their hive, so you wouldn't really get cross pollination, beyond that for insect pollinated plants. So those plants tend to be in clusters, but of course you'll get year on year, you'll get spread, and it really depends on the age of the population then, whether it's been there for tens or hundreds or possibly thousands of years. So that's a huge question.
Yeah, well, what I'm getting from all of these talks is that there's always so much more to learn, and that you could have, hours on the subject. Now, on that note, somebody has asked, and I know the answer, but I'll let you answer, do you run any workshops on seed saving?
Oh, yes, I do. Haven't done any this year because of, obviously, but I do. And so we were in the process of organising workshops for Caliph Seed Centre, so that people could sort of book on a course and then we've run it there. But I also, but for usually what I do is I would say to a community group, or a group of people, if they have their own space or their own polytunnel that they want to grow in, did they want me to come to them, and then I can answer very specific questions on their site and help them with their site. So it depends, but it can be either. But yes, yeah.
I think actually, is there a clone of you? I don't know how you get this much done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because last week I spoke to you, so you've had so honestly, everybody, you have to appreciate just how much work Debbie does. Because last week I spoke to you and you were being interviewed for, now which one was this, the BBC or Radio Ulster? Was that both last week?
It was Gardener's Corner, yes.
Yeah.
BBC Radio Ulster, Gardener's Corner. So
yeah.
Just the one.
Yeah, but then something else, and then then obviously there's different meetings you've been having, and then so actually I think you need cloned.
Yeah, actually that's a really good idea.
Although I say that and then I realise that is that something that you'd be anti, given that it's all the TM.
No, given my current workload, I would be very pro that.
And so somebody else has asked if they could have your contact details, but I believe that's all through your website, True Harvest Seeds, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So the website is .org, trueharvestseeds.org.
Mm-hmm. So then you can get in contact with you there. And do you have any coastal varieties of seeds?
Yeah. Off the top of my head, we've got. We will actually be having limegrass for the first time this year. So that's coastal species. We've got sea aster. We've got sea aster. It's a lovely colour of a flower when it comes up, but it's really scrappy looking thing. I love it. A lot of our plants tend to be, it depends what you want to do. Wild carrot tends to be quite coastal. We've got off the top of my head, everything we've got for sale is on the website and the shop. It's kind of in alphabetical order. And the habitat, I do have a line about habitat in each species. So you probably get things that like sandy soil. Depends. What else we have? Don't know. I'm just sitting here trying to remember. I can't think.
If they go to your website, though, they've got the ones that you've got available. Are you still sending out seeds at the moment?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So we're harvesting like crazy at the minute. So we'll have new varieties coming on as well, and we're going to start doing mixes as well this year.
Hooray.
So yeah, because I wasn't doing mixes, so people could make their mix and match their own, but people can still, anybody can still do that, but also they could buy a mix off the shelf, so to speak. So something.
Oh, that would be lovely. And then did you so the other question I think this one is more appropriate for next week, which is about harvesting seeds. So Andrew, are you going to be on next week's talk?
Yeah, I will be.
Ah, fantastic. So if you're happy to save that question to next week, because it might get answered.
Great. Yeah, no worries.
And then, so Judith, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to ask it? Gonna go with, I think I'm going to be the voice today. Can people get involved to volunteer and help at the Caliph Centre and learn more?
Oh, yes. Which Judith? I know we have.
This is Judith Riddle. So Judith, are you there? Do you want to say hello?
Hi, Judith.
No, just
hi.
hiding. Waving. Okay, good.
Hi. Yes, Judith. I would absolutely love to. Yes. Yes is the answer. There's plenty to do. Everything at the moment we're harvesting, and there's also plenty of weeding to do. Well, it's not very exciting, so I don't tend to make, if you just joined, I don't make you do the weeding yet.
You work up to that, huh?
Work up to that, but then you do learn your noxious weeds with weeding, but a bit of everything is really, and of course I show volunteers around the seed centre and really try and answer questions as we're going about the day. But it seems to be really that the way people learn when they come and volunteer is just sort of, the knowledge just seems to flow. Alex could maybe tell you a bit more about that, Alex being a volunteer. But hopefully the knowledge I don't know, I can't think. My brain's starting to get tired. So
no, but that's okay. I mean, I think we can see if anyone's got any more questions, and then go from there. And then
yeah. Well, I just want to say, Judith, if you would like to get in touch, just my phone number's on the website. Just give me a shout. So
perfect. I think that's brilliant. Is Alex on the call? Does he on this webinar? Would he? She. Sorry. Yeah. Beg your pardon. Would like to say anything yet about the volunteering, or would rather not?
Well, no. I'll yeah. I'm quite new to this. I've only joined Debbie in the last month or so, but she's a total font of knowledge, and she puts up with me very kindly because I tend to ask a lot of questions, and because it's a whole learning process for me, but it's a great place to be, and I'm just learning so much about wildflowers and weeds and everything, and the whole process. It's absolutely fantastic.
Oh,
so get involved. Get involved. I would just say get involved. Yeah.
All right, Marianne, maybe we could get a wee working party to go up from the pod project.
Yeah, I think that would be lovely. I think we should definitely do that.
I would appreciate that so much.
Yeah, so I think we'll. I definitely need to learn more about all of that. So that's good. So yeah, I'd love to do that, and then hopefully we can get you to come and visit the pod project too. So that would be really nice.